names into their original names. So that's why you see Moshe instead of Moses. It says, on the day Moses finished putting up the tabernacle, he anointed and dedicated it with all of its furnishings on the altar. Okay, so you see that, and it didn't really translate it completely. I copied and pasted those from BibleHub.com, but that word dedicated means Hanukkah. He anointed and he Hanukkah'd it. Okay, and the next slide, hopefully it translated my Hebrew. The next one there, Scott. I've got 3 more verses that have the word Hanukkah in there. And the first one is going to be Psalm 30, verse 1.
There you go. Psalm 30, verse
1. It says a psalm for the Hanukkah of the house, or the dedication of the house. And so whenever you see house, remember house is an idiom, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And Nehemiah 12, verse 27, it said, at the dedication, or the Hanukkah of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites to bring them to Jerusalem. Is that me? What am I doing? All right. Better? You guys awake, though? All right. So where were we at? Let it hang? Okay. What? This is a great look for me, isn't it, with this hanging down like this? All right. Dedication. The Hanukkah of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites from wherever they had settled to bring them to Jerusalem and to celebrate the Hanukkah, or the dedication, with hymns of thanksgiving and with songs accompanied by cymbals, lutes, and lyres. And then on 2 Chronicles 7, verse 9, it says, on the 8th day, they held an assembly, having observed the Hanukkah of the altar for 7 days and the festival for 7 days. So it would make me very happy if anybody could tell me which festival these guys would have been celebrating that lasts for 7 days that has an 8th day at the end of it. Does anybody remember from our fall feast days which one this would be? Yes! Yay, that makes me so happy. Did you hear what she said? Feast of Tabernacles. Do you guys remember Feast of Tabernacles? They celebrated. It was the season of their joy. By the way, I'm assuming too much. How many of you guys were here when I talked about my fall feast? A couple of people. Okay, good. So the fall feast of Tabernacles was when they celebrated it for 7 days, and then they had an 8th day. Okay? So the Hanukkah season is brought to you by the number 8. It's celebrated for 8 days. And the reason why
is because the number 8 was when everything went back to God. The number 8 is very significant, so we're going to talk about the number 8. When God was writing the scriptures, he had not only the Hebrew alphabet. The Hebrew alphabet is word pictures, but the Hebrew letters also double as numbers. So every word adds up to a total, okay? But not only that, all the numbers in the Bible, or a lot of them, are very, very important. So we talked about the number 7. Remember the number 7 meant divine, completion. That's when the whole goal is to number 7, where God's divine plan is completed. Number 8 in the Bible means there's new beginnings. It's when it starts over. Everything goes back to God. It's when everything gets dedicated. Number 8 means resurrection. All right? So the new heaven and new earth, remember we had talked about how the 8th day was a special day after the Feast of Tabernacles, but it's also the day that God will recreate the heavens and the new earth. It's because the number 8
is significant for restarting over. Okay, so interesting things about the number 8. If you look at the Hebrew numerals, if you go straight down that first column, you'll see the 8th letter is that, it almost looks like a 3 sides. That's the Hebrew letter Het, and that is the first letter of Hanukkah, okay? And it's the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So I thought that was interesting. A couple other little tidbits about the number 8. This is when all of the boys are circumcised. They're dedicated. Remember Hanukkah? They're Hanukkah, and they're named, and they're dedicated. They're offered back to God. That's on the 8th day that happens. The New Testament was penned by only 8 men: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, James, Peter, Jude, and Paul. I thought that was interesting. We already talked about the fall Feast of Tabernacles, and immediately the last 8th day was the 8th day. Abraham, did you guys know he had 8 sons? So he had Ishmael, I think, when he was 86. He had Isaac when he was around 100. And then after Sarah died, he remarried, and then he ended up having 6 more sons after that. So he had 8 sons total. Jesus showed himself alive 8 times after his resurrection. God saved 8 people on the ark in order to have a new beginning for mankind. So he had Noah and his wife, and he had 3 sons, and they all had wives, so that equals 8. 8 is the number of Jesus in Greek. So Greek is like Hebrew. All the letters double as numbers. So if you add up the Jesus transliterated into the Greek letters, is that iosis? And if you add up all of his letters, it adds up to 888. Thought that was interesting. Jesse, who was the father of David. David was the 8th son, all right, in the line of Messiah. And I think that's pretty much all the tidbits that I found were interesting. So we're going to
come back to that number 8 at the end, but I just thought that when you see the number 8, that is very significant, and that's why Hanukkah, when I tell you the story, that's why it's 8 days, because it's a dedication. Everything goes back to God. Okay, so what's the next one? Okay. So Hanukkah is actually mentioned in the scriptures 8 different times. That's interesting. One of these 8 times, it's no coincidence that it's mentioned in the book of Daniel. So we're going to park in the book of Daniel for just a little bit here. How many of you guys like world history? Oh, I see 3 hands. Okay, good. I see more. I had really, really good history teachers. They made history come to life for me. If I had biblical prophecy in conjunction with my world history class, it would have made school so much more interesting. So I'm going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes giving you guys a world history lesson, and hopefully I'll make it exciting and you guys will be interested in it. Okay, so and I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to read a bunch of stuff from the book.
I'm just going to paraphrase because I know that you guys know the story very well. So you'll remember that the Israelites were not keeping the commandments of God, so they lost the right to live in the land of Israel. So Babylon was raised up by God to go to Jerusalem and take all the golden articles and take all the Jewish men captive, right? And they made them eunuchs in their court. So Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were made eunuchs, and they served the king, and the king of that day was Nebuchadnezzar, okay? So Nebuchadnezzar, in the course of this captivity, he had this very scary vision. And his vision was of this. He had this vision, it was a dream, of this head being of gold, and the breast and the arms of this statue was made of silver, and then the belly and the thighs were made of brass. I know that's kind of hard to read. Legs of iron, and then the feet and the toes were part iron, part clay. And nobody was able to interpret this vision. No one, in fact, he didn't even tell his sages what his vision was. He just said, you have to tell me what my vision is and then tell me what it means. And nobody, of course, could do it. So he said, I want all of you guys murdered, just pull their limbs apart is basically what he said. And Daniel says, wait, hold on, just give me one day. I'm going to go to God, and I'm going to see if he's going to tell me what your vision is and what it means. So Daniel has the same dream that night, and he sees what the king, Nebuchadnezzar, saw, and he was able to tell this to the king. And this is the interpretation of it. He said, the head of gold is your kingdom of Babylon. He says, you have been set apart by God. You've been given this kingdom, but you're going to get it taken away. Some other empire is going to come and take it away from you. So that was the breast and the arms of silver, and that we know was the Median Persian Empire, okay? After the Median Persian Empire, there was another empire that came, and that was the belly and the thighs. That was the Greek Empire, all right? Then after the Greek Empire, there's the Roman Empire, and that's the legs of iron, all right? Now then the feet and the feet and the toes of the statue are empires that are yet to come, all right? And I believe that I can make a very good case, which I'm not tonight because I don't have time for that, but I believe that that is the Nation of Islam, because you've got the 10 toes and you've got the caliphate. What does Islam want? They want the 10-headed council. They want 10 kings, and they want to take over pretty much every part of the world that they. So these nations, these empires that Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar are seen as prophetic, are only applicable to Israel and Jerusalem. So we're not concerned with Norway, Sweden. We're not concerned with Europe. United States is not even been discovered yet. We're not talking about South America or Africa. God is only concerned with telling Daniel what's going on in the land of Israel and Jerusalem. All the prophecies that you see that Daniel has Jerusalem as its epicenter, because Jerusalem is the apple of God's eye, right? So he's telling Daniel what's going on with the land of Israel. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar, he does not appreciate the
interpretation, and so he sets up a golden idol about 90 feet high. How tall is the ceiling? Huh? Like a silo? A silo. Because this is not 90 feet. What is this, about 50? No. What is this? 25. Okay, so 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. He makes a statue of himself of solid gold. What a waste of natural resources, I'm telling you. And then he says, okay, when you hear the trumpet sound, everybody needs to come and bow down to this golden statue. So this is a very insecure man, and he doesn't like the idea of his kingdom being taken away from him. You don't know the story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down to the idol, and so they were thrown into the fiery furnace, but there was a fourth one walking around. They were saved. All right, go to the next slide. I said all that to say this next verse has the verse Hanukkah in it. Is it not going? Here he is. Daniel 3, verse 2.
Then Nebuchadnezzar the king summoned all these guys to assemble and come to Hanukkah, the statue which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Okay, so then the next slide. All right, I want to show you the timeline so you can kind of see where we are in history. Do you see from 1,000? Oh, I've got a pointer. Or I've got a, okay. So from here to here, this is after Moses. This is David. And Israel's living in peace in the land of Israel, but then these kings right here are bad kings, and everybody sins, and they get exiled here. So this right here is Daniel in Babylon. You see, conquered by Babylonians, lived in exile. Then they come back to the land, and while they're in this land, it says they return to Israel to live as in province within Gentile empires. And God is telling them these are the empires that are going to be in control of Israel and Jerusalem during this time. And then when you see Jesus, that's when the Romans have come on the scene, right? So we're going to talk about this period of time right in here where the Greek Empire is occupying Israel. So this is about 100 to 200 years prior to Jesus coming on the scene. That's the period of time we're talking about, okay? This is the period where Nebuchadnezzar has seen, this is the brass part, okay? So we're just going to talk about a little bit about the history there. Okay, the next one. Okay, so Daniel, and this I'm giving you a history of Hanukkah. I'm going somewhere with this, so just hang on. This is going to be really cool. So there's a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes that came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. It came toward the two-horned ram I had seen stand beside the canal and charged at it with great rage. I saw it attack the ram ferociously, striking the ram and shattering its 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground and trampled on it, and none could rescue the ram from its power. The goat became very great. Very great, that's important. For the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven. Okay, so the next slide then is a picture, and I love artists because they put on paper what Daniel was seeing. So you see the he-goat, he's going toward the 2-headed ram right there, okay? So we got to answer the question, who is the goat with who's the horn, who's the ram, and who are the 4 prominent horns? So go to the next one. Okay, so Daniel, he says, Gabriel comes and he says, I'm going to tell you, Daniel, what your vision means. And I love when the Bible tells us what the vision means, because then we don't have to figure it out. He says, I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. So you're going back to Nebuchadnezzar's vision. This is after Babylon. This is the torso, okay? Then the shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. The 4 horns that replace the one that was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation but will not have the same power. So we have to ask that question, who's the first king of Greece? Does anybody remember before I go to the next slide? Yes. Alexander the Great. Yes. You guys remember this from world history? Alexander the Great? No one remembers Alexander the Great. Okay. Go to the next slide then. This is Alexander the Great. He was the first king of the Greek Empire. He lived only about 33 years, from AD 356 to 323. And he, in his 33 years, he was quite an ambitious young man. He conquered most of the known world, including Palestine and Jerusalem. And when he got to the age of 33, he was bummed out because there was hardly any place to conquer anymore. He would have gone on to conquer more things, I'm sure, but they don't really know how he died at the young age of 33. He was not killed in battle. He was either poisoned, had malaria, but he had some kind of fever, and he died. Well, after he died...
Okay, so he's the he-goat with the long horn, because it said in Daniel that he became very great. That's why that is Alexander the Great. I wrote down a couple of his quotes. He's remembered for some of his notable quotations. He said, there is nothing impossible to him who will try. And then he says, I am dying from the treatment of too many physicians. So that's why he thought he died. Too many doctors. But one thing I want to say about Alexander the Great, do I have a slide of what he conquered? I think on the next one too. Yeah, look at the territory that Alexander the Great conquered.
In fact, his army probably was glad that he died because they were so worn out. They were so tired. And they were brutal. The Greeks were brutal. But one of the things they did do, to their credit, is they left the Jewish people alone. So can you see where this would be, if I hit my handy dandy, this is Israel right in here, right? Right on this, okay? So they're right smack dab in the middle of all of this Greek culture, okay? And Alexander the Great was very content to let the Jews be. So they got to, keep the Sabbath day holy. They got to read their Torah. They kept
all of the temple sacrifices going, everything that they needed to do in order to honor God's commandments. Alexander the Great was fine. He said he was interested in conquering territory. Okay? But the Greek talked to the Jewish people because they were hemmed in on the other side of this Hellenistic culture. I actually did some research on what the Greek culture was like during that time. The Greek culture, they didn't like babies, by the way. They were very mean, they were very rough for babies, and they kind of threw babies away a lot of times. If you look at Greek art, every single statue that you see, the people are completely nude. They very much glorified the human body, so their dress was different. They wore any clothing at all. They were very brutal. Their 7-year-olds, they would haul off to military camps. Remember the Spartans? They were just very ruthless. And they excelled in arts, the literature, drama, music, all these literary arts. This was the Hellenistic culture, remember, from world glorify the human body, there's a lot of pedophilia that was not only done but encouraged. Okay, so it was a sick and twisted culture, and this is where the Jews were living. Okay, so now the next slide. Let's go back and reread Daniel 8:22.
Remember, he died when he was 33. Alexander the Great did, right? But what does it say? 4 horns replace the one that was broken off, represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation but will not have the same power. And that's exactly what happened. When Alexander the Great died, 4 generals took over the 4 winds of his kingdom. And these are the generals' names: Cassander, Ptolemy, Antigonus, and Seleucus, I think is how you say his name. So these 4 over Alexander the Great's territory, but that's right, they did not have the same charisma. They didn't have the ability to lead. There was a lot of infighting, and so they did not have the same power that Alexander is. Right in this purple here, this is Israel, and so this whole territory was ruled by Antigonus. Okay, okay, go to the next one. Okay. So these 4 leaders were not very effective, and Antigonus then was taken over by Antiochus the first, followed by King Antiochus the second, third, and then the 4th. In Daniel 8:23, it says, "In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. His powers will be mighty, but not by his own power, and he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. And what will his fight be against? The whole mighty men and the holy people." So this was Antiochus Epiphanes. This is the man who rose to power, and they called him Antiochus Epimanes because Epimanes in Greek meant the mad one. So I was trying to rack my brain, trying to think of a counterpart to our modern leaders. And you guys remember them calling Saddam Hussein Saddam insane? Yeah? Am I the only one that remembers that? Maybe we coined that. I don't know. You remember that, right? They called Saddam Hussein Saddam insane. Okay, similar. Antiochus Epimanes, they call him the mad one, because he was nutso. I mean, this guy was so full of himself and so arrogant. But he had a problem. Alexander the Great was fine. He just wanted to conquer land and leave the Jews alone. This guy, he called himself Antiochus. He added the words Epiphanes because that means God manifest. He thought he was God, okay? And so he did not like that the Jewish people were sacrificing at the temple to the one true God. He became very insanely jealous. He was an arrogant, prideful man. I mean, it tells you right there what kind of a man he is. And so he decided he was going to destroy Jerusalem in the sanctuary. What's the next slide say again? Okay, so I know that's kind of small, but I want to tell you, okay, so I'm going to read Daniel 9:26-27 real quick here. It says, "The people of a prince yet to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary." So this is Daniel continuing on. He's already talked about the he-goat and the ram. He's already talked about the 4 winds being, the territory being sectioned off into 4. Now he's saying in that time, there's the people of the prince yet to come. He's going to destroy the city and the sanctuary. About Jerusalem. He's going to destroy Jerusalem, but his end will come with a flood, and desolations are decreed until the war is over. He will make a strong covenant with leaders for 1 week of years. So how many years is that? 7, yep. For half of the week. How long is half of a week of years? 3.5 years. He will put a stop to offering. On the wings of detestable things, the desolator will come and continue until the already decreed destruction is poured out on the desolator. So we have 2 historical sources that talk about this particular time in the Jewish history. One of them is Flavius Josephus. He was a historian that wrote during the Second Temple period. And so he tells us exactly word for word the stuff that went on during this time. It said the king, so that's Antiochus Epiphanes that he's talking about, being thereto disposed beforehand, complied with them and came upon the Jews with a great army and took their city by force and slew a great multitude of those that favored Ptolemy. Those were the people to Egypt. And so after he conquered Egypt, then he came in
and sacked Jerusalem. And he sent out his soldiers to plunder them without mercy. And he also spoiled the temple and put a stop to the constant practice of offering the daily sacrifices for how many years? 3.5 years, 6 months, right? Just word for word what Daniel told them would happen. So this part of Daniel's prophecy has already come to pass, all right? Now the next historical work that we have that details for us what happened during that first is the book of Matthew, first and second book of Matthew. How many of you guys? The first and second book. But I think I got the cover of the book. Okay. You can download this if you have Kindles. It'll cost you 99 cents. And I took a Saturday, this last Saturday, and I read the entire first and second book of Matthew. I had read parts of it before, but I thought I'd just read it from cover to cover. Jewish scholars as well as church leaders do not consider the book of Maccabees as the divine word of God, and I would agree with that. They look at this as historical. This is merely historical. Think of the book of Maccabees as the diaries of Anne Frank. So diaries of Anne Frank, we look at as a person who was inside the concentration camps during the Holocaust, and we look at her work as true. We believe what she's saying because she is writing about what she lived for. This was written 65 years after these events, and they were written down by the men who lived through this horrible time in Jewish history. So I thought I would read, for those of you who have not read the book of Maccabees, it's laid out kind of like the Bible is, where chapter and verse, and there's multiple translations of it, just like the Bible. But they are looking at this specifically as historical documentation, and as written by the people who lived during this time. So would you guys like to hear a little bit about the book of Maccabees? Is there a way I can get a little more light up here? My font size is small. If not, that's fine. Alright. I'll just come more into the light. They're spraying from, oh, and we should preface this, okay. So I said all that, are you following me where we are in world history stage? Okay, we're in the Greek Empire, we're right here on the statue, we're right at the time where Antiochus Epiphanes is doing his awful destruction. He's the prince that was prophesied by Daniel, and he's going to do atrocious things to the people of God. Now, again, we're in the middle of this Hellenistic culture that I just said to you. So there's Jews that have kind of wanted to go the way of the Greek culture. It's really difficult to be completely opposite everybody around you. So the kids want to go to Greek schools and Greek friends. It's very hard to be in a culture that is strictly 100% for God when everybody around you is worshiping all kinds of different gods. They're dressing different. Their values are different. Their entertainment's different. Kind of sounds like the United States of America. It's very difficult to walk with God in this country where we've got humanism all around us. So this particular battle was Jew against Jew. Jews that were going to be assimilated into the Greek culture, and the Jews that wanted to stay with the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? So it says they're sprang from Mace a simple shoot. His name was Antiochus Epiphanes, the son of King Antiochus. In those days appeared in Israel men who were breakers of the Torah, and they seduced many people, saying, "Let us go make an alliance with the Gentiles all around us." Ever since we separated from the Gentiles, have you heard that? You know, it's hard to keep ourselves separated because everybody wants to just get along. Can we just get along, right? Can we just coexist? This was the lie that these people in Israel were believing. The proposal was agreeable. Some from among the people promptly went to the king Antiochus, and he authorized them to introduce the ways of the Gentiles. So thereupon they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Gentile custom. So remember, the Greeks came up with the Olympics, right? So they built an Olympic stadium in Jerusalem. But back then, they did not compete with clothes on. They did all this naked. So they made the rabbis wrestle other men completely naked, right? This is what's going on. Antiochus defeated Egypt. In fact, I wanted to show you guys some artwork and sculptures of Greece, and I can't do it. It's completely appropriate to show in the church, right? You guys can go look at that online if you want. Antiochus defeated Egypt, and then what did he do? He invaded the sanctuary. He took away the golden altar, the lampstand, the light with all its fixtures, the offering table, the cups, the bowls, the censers, the curtains, the crowns, the golden ornaments of the temple. He stripped off everything and took off the gold and the silver and the precious vessels. So this guy has the audacity to go into God's temple, steal all of God's stuff, and take it away. So you can do this if you think that you're God manifest. You've got the chutzpah for it, right? Then the king wrote to his kingdom that all should be one people. No, this was going on back before Jesus came on the scene. He abandoned his particular customs, and all the Gentiles conformed to the way of the king. That's up, no skin off their back. And many Israelites, in favor of his religion, they sacrificed his idols and profaned the Sabbath. The king sent messengers with letters to Jerusalem, to the cities of Judah, ordering them to follow the custom that are foreign to their land. They decided no more animal sacrifices in the temple. They had to build pagan altars and temples and shrines to sacrifice pigs and unclean animals. They had to leave their sons uncircumcised, and they had to let themselves be defiled with every kind of impurity and abomination, so they might forget the Torah, change all their observances, and whoever refused to act according to the command of the king should be put to death. And this was not just a bullet to the head, this was burned alive. So think orange jumpsuits, think caves, or cages, think ISIS all over again. That's the kind of thing that was going on. So on the 15th day of the month of Kislev is the month of December, so this was winter. The king erected a horrible abomination. I have a picture of this. This was him. This is God's temple.
Somebody's, obviously you don't have cameras back. What it might have. He takes down all of the holy things, and in the holy place, he puts up an altar of Zeus, and then he makes the Jewish people sacrifice a pig on that altar and desecrate it. The Jews called this the abomination of the desolation. Okay? Any Torah scrolls that were found were burnt and torn up, and whoever was found with the Torah scroll of the covenant, whoever observed the Torah was condemned to death by royal decree. So, if you had a Bible, you were burned alive. Okay? Lovely time. Many in Israel were determined and resolved in their heart not to eat anything unclean. They preferred to die rather to be defiled by unclean food. So you can see hints of Daniel, Meshach, and Abednego. In the second book of Maccabees, I would not read it out loud here. If you want to go read it, it chronicles how a mother watched her 7 sons
tortured and killed right before her very eyes because they refused to be defiled with unclean things. All right, so then now we're entering, how many heard of Judas Maccabees? Have you ever heard of Maccabees? Okay, now we're at the part where the Maccabee family and the whole history of Hanukkah, this is where it happens. So the next slide. Okay, I just have a couple pictures and I'm going to read a little bit more.
You guys find the book of Maccabees interesting? Reading it from their perspective? Okay, so Matthias, he's the prince of the family of Jehoram, the first course of the priests. So you remember there's 24 courses of priests? Matthias, first course. So he would have served on the first month of the Hebrew, would have been the month March/April. And when he saw the sacrilege that was being committed, Modine, officers of the king addressed Matthias and it says, "You are a leader here, an honorable and great man in the city. Commander and all in Jerusalem are the king's friends, and he will be enriched with silver and gold and many gifts." See, they're trying to buy him off, right? You see the flattery and seduction. What do you think Matthias has said? He answered in a loud voice, and I love this. He says, "Although all the Gentiles of the king's realm obey him, so that each man forsakes the religion of his fathers and consents to the king's orders, yet I and my sons and my kinsmen will keep to the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we should forsake the Torah and the commandments. We will not obey the words of the king, nor depart from our religion in the slightest degree." And as he had finished saying these words, a certain Jew came forward to offer a sacrifice of a pig on the altar, and he was filled with such zeal that he sprang forward and he killed the guy on the altar, and then he also killed the messenger who came and was going to force them to sacrifice in this way. And then he said, let everyone who is zealous for the Torah and who stands by the covenant follow me. And therefore they fled to the mountains. Where do they flee? To the mountains. It's going to be very important. Put that in your mind. And many who sought to live according to righteousness and religious custom went to the desert. So they're in the mountains and in the desert. That's very important. Kind of stick that in your head. And men hurried out after them, their enemies did, and having caught up with them, they camped opposite, and they prepared to attack them. They were going to attack them on the Sabbath day. Okay, that's another very, very important point. So they're in the hills, they're in the mountains, and they're going to attack them on the Sabbath day because these are the religious, these are the people who are most wanting to keep God's commandments. And so they knew that if they attacked them on the Sabbath day, they probably weren't going to retaliate. All right? And they said, enough of this. Why don't you come out and obey the king's commands, and your lives will be spared? And they replied, we are not going to come out, nor will we obey the king's commands. And the enemy attacked them at once, but they did not retaliate. They did not throw stones. They did not block up the entrances of their caves, their hiding places. And the officers and soldiers attacked them on the Sabbath, and they died with their wives and their children and their cattle to the number of 1,000. And at this time, Matthias, so there's different groups of people. One of them went to the caves and the mountains, and one of them went to the sons. So Matthias was very grieved by this, and he's just let us to be able to protect ourselves on the Sabbath day. Whatever commandments of God, life has to come first. So from that point in time, they resolved that it doesn't matter what day that the enemy attacks them, they're going to defend themselves. And that's why the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, to this day, they will still protect Israel and their fellow Jews on the Sabbath day. They do not come back from the battlefield. They are still going out to find and bring terrorists to judgment, even if it's on the Sabbath day. And they started doing this from the time of the Maccabees, because they were like, in fact, I'll quote this. Matthias says, if we do not fight our kinsmen against the Gentiles, they would destroy us from off the face of the earth. So then this day they came to the decision, let us fight against anyone who attacks us on the Sabbath, so that we might not all die as our kinsmen had in their hiding places.
Okay. So the book of Maccabees, if you read through the whole thing, it's very cool. It's like some of you guys that like army type books. Matthias is old. He passes away from old age, and then his oldest son Judah takes his place. And Judah Maccabees was known as the Hammer. His army. Things like this, like they get all this army, and it's kind of like a ragtag group. They're not real organized, but they end up defeating, trouncing 1,000 of Antiochus Epiphanes' soldiers. So Antiochus sends 5,000 more, and the Jews rise up with Judah Maccabees, and they push them back, and 5,000 are completely destroyed. So Antiochus sends 10,000 troops, same thing. Jews completely, utterly decimate them, and they push them back. It was a great time in Israel. God was fighting with Judah Maccabees. He had raised him up for that period of time. The guy was righteous. He was holy to the Lord. These people were filled with zeal, and God was backing them with military success and might. And they won an incredible victory, pushed back King Antiochus, so he had to leave the temple. All right? So now we pick up the story. This is the history of Hanukkah. Next slide. Okay. So after it was over,
because they did this campaign for about 3 years. So for 3.5 years, the sacrifices had stopped, just like Daniel had foretold. And they come back, and this is according to Maccabees. It says, they found the sanctuary had been desolate after 3 years. The altar had been desecrated. The gates were burnt. The weeds were growing in the courts like a forest or on some mountain. And the priest's chambers were demolished. On the very anniversary of the day that the Gentiles had defiled it, on that very day, they consecrated it with songs. For 8 days, they celebrated the dedication, or the Hanukkah, of the altar, and Israel decreed that the day of dedication of the altar be observed with joy and gladness on the anniversary of the 8 days every year thereafter. Is all about. Now, story goes that when the bees came and saw it dead, a cruise of left. Have you guys ever heard this? Miraculously, oil could be prepared and to relight on the next 8 days. I read Maccabees 1 and 2 cover to cover. I cannot find the story. Josephus does not recount the story. Nobody seems to think the story is actually true. And if I'm giving you Hanukkah, I got to give you the best, most accurate version that I can possibly think of. I can possibly bring you. So it's almost like the rabbis go, wink, wink. This didn't really happen, but that's all right. Yeah, the rabbis recount the miracle of Hanukkah in these terms, and the Jews defeated the crews and all this, and so anyway, I can't. Okay, would you agree with that, Pastor Steve? You agree? He concurs. Okay. Would you? This is my mom and dad, by the way. Would you agree with that, Dad? You would agree with that. Oh, I was going to tell you this. Okay. They weren't able to cycles would have been around the September, October time frame. Allowed to do that. The Antiochus Epiphanes allowed to celebrate that. This was the most wonderful time of the year for them, right? Is because they were catching up on the tabernacles that they missed. But they also knew dedication happens for 8 days. The 8th day, everything gets back and dedicated to God. Remember, I had read back in Numbers and in Exodus how the 8th day is the day that everything goes back to God. It's a new beginning. So they are in essence saying, we're doing a new beginning for the temple. We got the altar, got a brand new one. We're going to sacrifice a clean animal on there to the Lord. And so this is what they said. They celebrated Hanukkah for 8 days with gladness like Sukkot, and recalled how a little while before, during Sukkot, they had been wandering in the mountains and caverns like wild animals. So carrying lulavs, do you remember what the lulavs were? Those are the palm branches where they shook it to the north, south, east, and the west. They offered hymns of praise to God who had brought to pass the purification in its own place. And you'll find that in the second book of Maccabees, chapter 10, verse 6 and 7. What's the next one? Oh yeah, I found this funny. I just had to share it because that's a lot of history. So this is kind of light and funny. It says the cell phone only had enough battery power for 1 day, but it lasted 8 days. So that would be the miracle of Hanukkah updated. Thought you guys would like that one. All right. But it really didn't happen. All right. What's the next slide? Okay. So this, I brought my Hanukkah. I was so excited as a teacher, I got to bring all kinds of visual aids for you guys.
So this is what they use. This is different than menorah. The menorah is a 7-branch. You'll see it in English Bibles as candlestick or lampstand, but it was actually the menorah. So if you see the English word in your Bible, think a 7-branch menorah. This is a Hanukkah. This is what they use. This has become symbolic with the Hanukkah. I've got a little placemat here. I got this from, you guys are going to laugh, I ordered this from Amazon.com, and it came from a Jewish store in Brooklyn, New York. So this one's battery operated. So the first day of Hanukkah, which starts on Monday, this is the Shamas candle. This is the helper candle, the tallest one of them all. So you light that one first, and then you light the one to the end, and you let the candles go all the way down. It takes about half an hour. And then the second day, you say a blessing again, and then you light the Shamas candle, the first and the second ones. The kids love doing this. And the third day, you light the third one, the fourth one. So by the time you get to the 8th day, isn't this fun? All the candles are lit. It's battery operated. I love that. This is one I got at Target. Target here in Lake Geneva has a very, very small Hanukkah section. I don't know where the Jews have a whole box of that you can get. So if you wanted to celebrate Hanukkah, Target in Lake Geneva, and then Lake Geneva Walmart has a small little kosher section that you can get like latkes if you want. But that's, they do a blessing and they light candles and put them in their windows. And then they play this game called dreidel. Have you ever heard of dreidel before? Okay. So the story goes that, that during the Greek occupation, they were not allowed to read from their Torah scrolls. They weren't allowed to think Bible. They didn't have a book back then. Everything was a scroll back then. So their Torah was Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That's what they had. That was their scriptures that they were studying. They were not allowed to study them under the Greek occupation because they were afraid they were going to be burned alive. Who wants to die like that, right? But they still had such a dedication to the Word of God. They still wanted to study it. So they would get their Torah scrolls out and they would study it illegally. And they would have a guy that would be kind of on the lookout. And if they saw a Greek soldier come, they would have some kind of symbol to let them know that danger was coming. And they quick rolled their scrolls, put them in their roll, and then they would get out these little top type things. These Christopher, you can probably spin these. Yeah, it's not going to spin very well. Anyway, they'd spin these, and they would pretend like they're gambling. And they gamble for gold coins. And then when the Greek soldiers would go away, they'd put their gambling gimbals away, and they'd get out their Torah scrolls, and they would resume studying from the scriptures. Well, it came down to, they added these letters. So this is the letter Sheen. It stands for the first letter of the word Sham, or Sham, which means there. And then this is the letter Hey. It stands for the word Hayah, which means happened. This is the letter Gimel. It stands for Gadol, which means great. And then Nes is miracle, and that would be the noon, and that's this one. So in Hebrew, it would say, there happened great miracle. We would translate it into English sentence that we could understand. It's a
I would say that the great miracle that happened in Hanukkah was that there were people that were willing to not go with the
Greek culture, but separate themselves on pain of torture and death to be committed to following after God's commands. That's the real miracle. To get that many people that are so zealous for their God, so zealous for their covenant, that they're willing to go through that is a miracle to me, more than the cruse of oil. But that's, if you're seeing people do the gambling thing, and now you can get like these little chocolate coins. So, and if, Christopher, do you remember the sheen? What happens when you get the sheen that lands on the sheen? Is that good? Some of them are like the,
You get like 2 coins.
You get 2 coins. What about the hay?
I think you get half the coins.
Yeah, you get the half the coins. The gimel's bad, right?
You get all the coins.
Oh, you get all the coins? What about the noon?
You get none.
None. Okay, so that's how that game works. My kids know it better than I do. All right. So what's the next one? Oh yeah, here's some kids dressed up, I'm sure.
Playing the dreidel game. Hanukkah is great you're encouraged to eat fried foods, fried in oil.
So you get to eat fried. We had a Hanukkah party at my house last year, and we ordered Dunkin' Donuts, and Dunkin' Donuts will put the Star of David and frosting on for you because we asked. So you're supposed to fry your jelly donuts in oil. It's a fantastic holiday. Anyway, all right. Next one. Somebody asked me, where's Hanukkah in the Bible? All right.
Coincidentally, Hanukkah is mentioned in the New Testament. It's really the only place in the Bible it's mentioned. It's mentioned in the book of John chapter 10, verse 22 through 23. And this is the verse, I put both translations because the top translation is what most of your Bibles are going to say. It says, and it was Jerusalem, the feast of dedication, and it was winter. What should have they put? Should have put Hanukkah. So that's why I prefer my complete Jewish Bible translation, because it takes those words that I'm familiar with already in Hebrew and it keeps them for me. But I want to stop here and say, someone asked me a question, what's the best translation to use? And there's two answers that I like the best. The first one is to learn Hebrew or to learn Greek yourself, so you don't have to go through a middleman. You can just read it yourself. But honestly, who of us is going to have time to learn a brand new language, right? The very next best answer that I love, because I love it, the wisdom of God is, first of all, peaceable. I think that the best translations are as many as you can get your hands on. Because a translation is really, it's a translation. It's somebody's opinion of what that particular sentence should be translated into that particular language. And they can only choose one certain way of translating that for you. They can pick one word, or else your Bibles would be so long. And so I think it's very valuable. If you go to BibleHub.com, that is a really great study tool, because what it does is and also the BlueBible.com, it allows you to see all the verses in the 25, 30, 40, 50 translations that exist, so you can see how many different opinions are out there to translate that particular verse, okay? So, but I personally like my complete Jewish Bible because it keeps all the Hebrew names, keeps the places, and it keeps what words I'm familiar with intact. So I get the full from Exodus to Numbers, Daniel, and then the New Testament. I'm seeing the same word Hanukkah all the way around, and I understand what this is talking about. So anyway, going back to John 10, it says, there came Hanukkah in Jerusalem. It was winter. Why was it winter? Because we're in the month of December, right? And Yeshua was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Solomon. Okay, so that's what Israel would look like in winter, very similar to what we have here. I think I have Jesus walking in the colonnade. The next slide. Good. Okay. So this was the Solomon colonnade. Now, those of you who have been to Israel, is it still in existence? The porch? This is the porch of Solomon? Or no? Okay. It would be underground. Okay. So this was a 75-foot by 45-foot hall outside with columns, and this was a very common place for religious leaders to congregate and for the people to come and ask questions. All right, so it's no surprise that this was the place where this particular exchange took place. Now you remember, the Jews are under Roman occupation, so we're no longer talking about Nebuchadnezzar's belly here. We're talking about the legs, right? The iron, the Roman Empire occupation. So during the month of December, when they're celebrating Hanukkah, Israeli Jewish nationalism is an all-time high. They are wanting to live out the days of Judah Maccabees again. They want to push back Rome, and they want their Messiah to come and to sit on the throne of David and rule with righteousness so that they can be at peace. The phrase goes, so that every Jew can sit underneath his fig tree. That's the dream. In our vernacular, it'd be everybody on the beach, on their hammock, under a palm tree, sipping a pina colada, right? Nothing better than that. Well, if you see in the Bible that, everybody's sitting under their fig tree, that's paradise to the Jew, all right? So this is what they want, and this is what they're thinking during this time. All right. Now, Rome is very sensitive
to the fact that they know that the Jews are not happy with what's going on. They're being heavily taxed. They're being crucified. Their bodies are lining the roads. They're being scourged. They're being imprisoned. There's same stuff that's happening in Greece happen now in Rome. They are not happy with the Roman occupation. They want them out. All right? So then the next verse, right after we see that Jesus is at the temple during Hanukkah, next one there. Okay. It says the Jews who were gathered around him said,
how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. Are you a Judah Maccabees type person? Are you gonna rally us? We're ready to fight. Jesus had to be very careful how he answered this question. Why? Because Roman guards would send their spies to the Solomon colonnade to be very, very guarded and make sure that there was no terms like Messiah, like uprising, like revolt, because then they would come very quickly and squelch that, and Jesus knows that he's going to get his guys in trouble. They're going to get hauled off to prison or killed if they do something like that, because Rome is very sensitive at this point. So Jesus answered very shrewdly. He says, I did tell you, but you do not believe. The works I do in my Father's name testify about me, but you do not believe me because you are not my sheep. Probably not a great thing for him to say to them, because they're already on edge, right? He said, my sheep listen to my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. Verse 29, the next one. It says, my Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. And at this point, the Jews want to pick up stones and stone him. Why? Why are they going from a friendly conversation in the Solomon Colonnade during Hanukkah to stoning him so fast? Because Jesus had just claimed that he and God are one. And that's exactly what Antiochus Epiphanes did back at Hanukkah. And they were like, oh my goodness, this is happening again. And Jesus says, what works are you stoning me for? And they're like, we're honest. We're like, we're not stoning you for a good work, but for blasphemy, because you, a mere man, claim to be God. You're claiming to do the same thing that Antiochus Epiphanes did, right? And I didn't have this on there, I don't think, but before this whole conversation.
Do I have that up there? I can't remember. Yes. Said,
I must bring that they will listen to my voice, and they will be one flock and one shepherd. Time, the Jewish people are saying things like this. They're praying in the temple. They're saying, destroy the unrighteous rulers, purge Jerusalem from Gentiles, drive out the sinners, smash the arrogance of sinners, destroy the unlawful nations. These are the kind of nationalistic prayers the Jews are praying during this time of Hanukkah. They're praying, God, bring your Messiah. And then Jesus, who's doing Messiah-like things, they're asking him, are you the Messiah? And then he tells them, I've got sheep in the Gentile pen that I got to bring in. That's why they were upset. Because in their minds, they're not considering Gentiles at all. And Jesus is saying, there's some of you Jews that are not really mine. So now you can see why they are so upset and angst. Interesting enough, too, one historian that I looked at, she said okay, so you guys
remember last time I taught, I said that they have Torah portions that they read every single Shabbat. Well, then they have half Torah portions, because the poor Jews were told at one point they could not read the Torah portions, so they found a way to get around that. They found portions in the prophets and in the writings that had hints of the same types of material that Torah portion would have. Does that make sense? So they would read these half Torah portions of the prophets. Well, on this particular Shabbat week, a historian went back and looked, and they would have been reading from Ezekiel 34, which was all about the shepherd and how they are scattering their sheep. So they would talk about these subjects for that whole week. So the idea of a shepherd and a flock of Ezekiel 34 was very much on their minds, most likely, anyway. So that's one reason why Jesus would have been talking about the sheep and the shepherd. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. What's my next one there? Okay. So this is really cool. I'm going to make the case that Hanukkah, a like
event, is going to happen again. So this is why it's important to us, because this particular event has not happened. This is our future. And you're going to see hints of what exactly happened in the book of Maccabees to what Jesus is saying here. So Matthew 24, this is a very familiar passage. I'm not going to read the first 15 verses, but it starts out by saying the disciples are asking Jesus, what is the sign of your coming? And he goes through the list of horrible things that are going to happen, famines, earthquakes, the nations will rise against nations. And then he says this, when you see the abomination that causes devastation spoken about through the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand the allusion. So that's inserted. Jesus didn't say that. That's the translator, or Matthew, saying, hey, if you know the story of Hanukkah, remember what happened. What was that? What was the abomination? Desolation? It was when on the altar to God. That's what he's talking about. And it says, let there be, that will be the time for those in Judah to do what? Escape to the hills. Remember when I had read that Judah Maccabees said, hey, everybody come follow me, and they went to the hills? It says, if someone is on the roof, he must not go down to gather his belongings from his house. If someone is in his field, he must not turn back and get to his coat. What a terrible time it will be for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Why does he say that? I didn't read terrible what they did to pregnant women and mothers. If you want to know what they did, just read the book yourself. But that's why he's saying that. He's hearkening back to the horrible atrocities that they did to the babies during that time. It says, pray that you will not have to escape in winter or on Shabbat. Why is he saying that? Because the first Hanukkah was in winter, and they attacked him on Shabbat. It says, for there will be trouble worse than there has ever been from the beginning of the world until now, and there will be nothing like it again. Why is he saying that? Can you go to the next slide? This is from 1 Maccabees 9:27. It says, and there was a great tribulation in Israel, such as was not since the day that there was no prophet seen in Israel. Can you guys see? I mean, that's way too much coincidence of that many parallels. So Jesus is saying, sometime in the future, our future, guys, because we are long past Greek. I mean, Greece is bankrupt. We're not afraid of Greece anymore, right? Rome is a boot in the Mediterranean Sea. We're not afraid of Rome anymore. What is the empire that everybody on the news is freaked out about now? Islam, okay? If I could please recommend a book, I've been trying to get somebody to read this book. It's only about 450 pages, that's all. Have anybody heard this book, God's War on Terror? I've loaned it out a couple times, and people have returned it to me and saying I didn't have time to read it. This is by Walid Shubat. He was a Palestinian terrorist. His wife is a Christian, and she said to him, I want you to
I think, read the Bible, or he wanted to read the Bible to prove that Christianity is ultimately converted. And he ended up discovering in the scriptures about how God's not in favor of Allah. He doesn't stand with the Muslim countries. He stands with Israel. Okay? So he's written, this is a great, great book. It's called God's War on Terror, Islam, Prophecy, and the Bible. He makes a really good case for how the toes that are mixed with clay and iron are the Islamic Empire. Because again, we're concerned with empires that are taking control over Israel, that Middle Eastern part of the world. So Nebuchadnezzar's vision, the reason I went through the whole thing is because that's applicable to us. That's not just world history. A lot of that did happen, but there's a time that's coming. I believe the table is being set for Islamic Empire to come back into power over the Middle Eastern countries. They want a caliphate of 10 heads. I think that totally fits the 10 toes. And it's going to come to a point where somehow there's going to be a Temple Mount got restored to the Jews. They're going to have an altar. It wouldn't surprise me if at some point in time there was an altar erected to the god Allah. It won't be a big though, because Quran, that's an animal. In fact, I did read a little research. Allah, you typically sacrifice animals to Allah. What they told to the people that. I read this story from a book. These are stories from the Jews that were in the Holocaust concentration camps. So this is a very short story, and I'm going to close with this. So the setting is Virgin Belsen on the eve of Hanukkah. This is, in fact, if you want to fast forward about 6 of those slides, I have a picture of the Jewish people. Yep. Okay, so you can picture the barracks. The year is around 1940.
42, 43, 44, 40, somewhere, 42? Not too far removed from our history, all right? It's the eve of Hanukkah. A selection took place. Early in the morning, 3 German commandants, meticulously dressed in their festive black uniforms and in visibly high spirits, entered the men's barracks. They ordered the men to stand at the foot of their 3-tiered bunk beds. The selection began. No passports were required, no papers were checked, there was no roll call, and no head count. One of the 3 commandants just lifted the index finger in his snow-white glove and pointed in the direction of a pale face, while his mouth pronounced the death sentence with one single word: come. Like a barrage of machine gun fire came the German commands: come, 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 come. The men selected were marched outside. The SS with rubber truncheons and iron prods awaited them. They kicked, beat, and tortured the innocent victims, and when the tortured bodies no longer responded, the revolver was used. The random selection went on inside the barracks, and the brutal massacre continued outside the barracks until sundown. When the Nazi Black Angels of Death departed, they left behind heaps of hundreds of tortured and twisted bodies. Then Hanukkah came to Bergen-Belsen. It was a time to kindle the Hanukkah lights. A jug of oil was not to be found, no candle was in sight, and a Hanukkah belonged in the distant past. Instead, a wooden clog, a shoe of one of the inmates, became the Hanukkah. Strings pulled from a concentration camp uniform, a wick, and the black camp shoe polish was the pure oil. Not far from the heaps of the bodies, the living skeletons assembled to participate in the kindling of the Hanukkah lights. The rabbi of Blutzow lit the first light and chanted the first 2 blessings in his pleasant voice, and the festive melody was filled with sorrow and pain. When he was about to recite the 3rd blessing, he stopped. He turned his head and looked around as if he was searching for something. But immediately he had turned his face back into the quivering small lights, and in a small, reassuring, comforting voice, he chanted the 3rd blessing, which is this: Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive and has preserved us and enabled us to reach this season. Among the people present at the kindling of the lights was a Mr. Zamichkowski, one of the leaders of the Warsaw Band. He was a clever, sincere person with a passion for discussing matters of religion, faith, and truth. Even here in camp at Bergen-Belsen, as soon as the rabbi of Blutzow had finished the ceremony of kindling of lights, Zamichkowski elbowed his way to the rabbi and said, "Spira, you are a clever and honest person. I can understand your need to light the Hanukkah candles in these wretched times. I can even understand the historical note of the 2nd blessing, who wrought us miracles for our fathers in days of old at this season. But the fact that you recited the 3rd blessing is beyond me. How could you thank God and say, 'Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive and has preserved us and enabled us to reach the season?' How could you say it when hundreds of dead Jewish bodies are literally lying with the shadows of the Hanukkah lights, when thousands of living Jewish skeletons are walking around in camp and millions more are being massacred? For this you are thankful to God? For this you praise the Lord? This you call keeping us alive?" Zamichkowski, he said, "You are 100% right," answered the rabbi. "When I reached the 3rd blessing, I also hesitated and asked myself, what should I do with this blessing? I turned my head in order to ask the rabbi of Zamir and other distinguished rabbis who were standing near me if I indeed might recite the blessing. But just as I was turning my head, I noticed that there behind me a throng was standing, a large crowd of living Jews, their faces expressing faith, devotion, and concentration as they were listening to the rite of the kindling of the Hanukkah lights. I said to myself, if God, blessed be he, has such a nation that at times like these, when during the lighting of the Hanukkah lights they see in front of them the heaps of bodies of their beloved fathers, brothers, and sons, and dead is looking from every corner, if despite all that they stand in throngs and with devotion listening to the Hanukkah blessing, who wrought us miracles for our Father in days of old at this season, if indeed I was blessed to see such a people with so much faith and fervor, then I am under a special obligation to recite the third blessing. Some years after liberation, the rabbi of Lutzow, now residing in Brooklyn, New York, received regards from Mr. Zimikowski. Zimikowski asked the son of this rabbi to tell Israel Spira that the rabbi
of Lutzow, that the answer he gave him that dark Hanukkah night and Virgin Belsen had stayed with him ever since, and was such a constant source of